Mount Hermon stands 9,232 feet above sea level on the border of modern Syria and Lebanon. A United Nations buffer zone established in 1974 restricts civilian access to its upper reaches. The Book of Enoch names this exact peak, not a region, not a mountain range, as the precise descent site of the beings it calls the Watchers. The oath sworn there is preserved in Aramaic fragments at Qumran. The Book of Enoch was removed from the biblical canon at the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. Church leaders called it dangerous and unsuitable. For roughly 15 centuries, that decision held in Western Christianity. Then in 1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into a cave above the Dead Sea and heard something shatter. Among the scrolls recovered at Qumran were fragments of 1st Enoch, dating to at least 2 centuries before the Common Era, not copies of a fringe document, source material older than the New Testament. What makes the textual situation unusual? Jude 1:14, inside the accepted biblical canon, quotes 1st Enoch directly. The book that was removed from the canon is cited by a book that was kept in it. The institution that excluded one text preserved the other, and the other contains the quotation. What 1st Enoch describes is a hierarchy, named individuals, ranked positions, specific locations, specific acts, recorded with the kind of precision that scholars across the last century have found difficult to characterize simply as myth. This documentary examines what the text actually says, what mainstream scholarship has documented about the manuscript record, and where the line sits between what the text genuinely contains and what various researchers have proposed it means. Before we go further, subscribe now if this kind of textual and historical exploration is what you are here for. Every week this channel examines ancient texts, scholarly debates, and interpretive questions at the edges of mainstream scholarship. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The primary Aramaic manuscript for the passage in question is catalogued as 4Q201, housed at the Shrine of the Book at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. R.H. Charles produced a standard English translation of the Ethiopic manuscripts at Oxford in 1912, still cited as a baseline reference in comparative Enoch studies. Michael Knibb's 1978 Oxford Critical Edition, produced directly from the Ge'ez manuscripts, is the standard English-language academic translation. Ephraim Isaac's 1983 translation for the Old Testament Pseudepigrapha series, translated directly from the Ethiopian Ge'ez. George Nicholsberg's 2001 Hermeneia commentary on 1st Enoch for Fortress Press is the definitive contemporary scholarly reference. These are all real scholars with verifiable published work. Fragment 4Q201 through 4Q204, excavated at Qumran Cave 4 in the early 1950s, are publicly catalogued at the Israel Antiquities Authority in Jerusalem. The Ge'ez manuscripts, including MS Kebron 9 at the Kebron Gabriel Monastery on Lake Tana, Ethiopia, are real holdings in real institutions. The 3 separate manuscript traditions, Aramaic Qumran fragments, Ethiopian Ge'ez, and Greek Akhmim fragments, do preserve the same core content, and this convergence is acknowledged within mainstream Enoch scholarship. With those foundations established, here is what the text actually says. The passage opens not with a single figure, but with a number, 200. 200 beings descended, organized, named, and sworn to a collective oath before they moved. The Aramaic term used for them is Irin, plural. Knibb and other mainstream Enoch scholars translate this as watchers, a distinct rank, a specific designation within the text's cosmological hierarchy, not simply a synonym for angel in the general sense. This distinction between watchers as a rank and messenger angels as a different rank is documented in the scholarly literature. Leading them was Samjaza. Mainstream Enoch scholarship notes that this name does not appear in earlier Hebrew texts or in the Mesopotamian records that predated Enoch by centuries. Nicholsberg's published commentary acknowledges this as notable. Samjaza appears to originate within the Enochic literary tradition rather than being borrowed from an earlier source. This is documented in peer-reviewed Enoch scholarship. The oath Samjaza administered was sworn on the summit of Mount Hermon. The text records the structure of collective accountability. All 200 bound to the decision together, so that no single watcher could later claim he acted alone. Scholars working on ancient Near Eastern legal traditions have noted this oath structure has formal legal parallels in other ancient documents. R.H. Charles, working from both Ethiopic manuscripts and Aramaic fragments, published 22 individual names in his 1912 Oxford edition, each assigned a specific domain of knowledge they would transmit to humanity. These 22 names are consistent across the separate manuscript traditions, which mainstream Enoch scholarship acknowledges as significant for establishing the text's textual stability. First Enoch verses 8 through 10 of chapter 8, preserved in Ge'ez manuscript MS Hebron 9 and translated by Knib in his 1978 Oxford edition, describe a specific figure named Azazel and attribute to him a specific transmission of knowledge. The passage in Knib's scholarly translation reads, Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. He revealed to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them. He showed women the coloring of antimony, the beautifying of eyelids, the most precious and choice stones, and all coloring tinctures. This is a list, a specific, itemized list of technologies and practices. The Ge'ez term for what Azazel revealed carries a construction that scholars translate as hidden knowledge or concealed arts. The specific details, bladed weapons metallurgy, decorative cosmetics using antimony, are noted by Enoch scholars for their specificity within the genre. The connection some alternative researchers propose between this list and the archaeological record of Bronze Age metallurgy is worth examining honestly. The appearance of copper alloy blades and tin bronze weapons in the Near Eastern archaeological record around 3300 BCE represents a real technological transition that archaeologists and materials historians study. In some regions, the transition is more abrupt than in others. Whether the sequence of weapons, metallurgy followed by decorative metalwork followed by ritual arts, as described in the Enoch passage, corresponds meaningfully to the archaeological sequence is a proposed alternative research connection. It is not a conclusion within either Enoch scholarship or Bronze Age archaeology. The connection between Azazel in First Enoch and the word Azazel in Leviticus 16 is a genuine, documented scholarly question within biblical studies. Leviticus 16 describes the Day of Atonement ritual in which one of two goats is designated for Azazel, La Azazel in the Hebrew, and sent into the wilderness. The word is not translated in most English Bibles. Mainstream biblical scholars debate its meaning. Some read it as a proper name, some as a place name, some as an abstract concept, meaning removal or scapegoat. Whether the Azazel of Leviticus refers to the same figure described in Enoch is a genuine scholarly question, with multiple positions in the published literature. It is not settled, both readings, that they refer to the same entity and that they do not have scholarly proponents. First Enoch, chapter 15, verses 8 through 12, preserved in MS Hebron 9 and translated by Knib, contains what the text presents as a formal divine ruling on the nature of the Nephilim and their spirits. The passage reads, in Knib's scholarly translation, because they are born of spirit and of flesh, they shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. Evil spirits shall proceed from their bodies. Because they have gone forth from men and from the holy watchers, their beginning and primal origin are from creatures below, even though they were above. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. This is structured as a legal classification, a formal determination of category. The text distinguishes between the watchers themselves, bound and imprisoned, and the spirits of the Nephilim, not bound, active in the world. This distinction is notable within Enoch scholarship. George Nicholsburg's 2001 Hermenia commentary treats this chapter as one of the most theologically precise passages in the text, establishing a category of disembodied entity with a specific origin and a specific behavioral pattern. The proposed connection between this Enochic taxonomy and the concept of demons in later Christian theology is a legitimate area of scholarly discussion. Some mainstream scholars of early Christianity, including those working on the development of Christian demonology, have noted that the Enochic origin narrative provides a cosmological framework that later Christian theology simplified. This is discussed in the peer-reviewed literature on Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. It is a scholarly observation about the relationship between texts, not a claim about what demons literally are. The cross-cultural parallel the original script notes, similar behavioral profiles attributed to entities called Udug in Mesopotamia, Daimones in Greek tradition, and Shadim in Hebrew tradition, is a real observation within the comparative religion literature. Mainstream comparative religion explains such parallels through convergent human responses to illness, misfortune, and psychological disturbance across cultures, rather than through a common literal origin. Both the convergence and the mainstream explanation for it are worth knowing. Dead Sea Fragment 4Q204, Column 6, excavated at Qumran Cave 4 in 1952 and currently held at the Israel Antiquities Authority, preserves in Aramaic what the text frames as a divine imprisonment decree. The passage names a location, Dudael, a specific desert site, and describes physical confinement under rough rocks and in darkness with a specific future sentence. George Nicholsburg's 2001 Hermenia commentary cross-references the Qumran fragment against the Ge'ez manuscripts and notes the textual consistency across both traditions. The decree language and the named location are consistent across manuscript traditions. This is documented in mainstream Enoch scholarship. The text's framing of the flood as a response to the Nephilim's corruption, rather than solely to human moral failure, is a genuine and documented difference between the Book of Enoch's account and the Genesis account, as understood in Western Christian tradition. Mainstream scholars of Second Temple Judaism discuss this difference in published work. The Enochic tradition presents a cosmological cause for the flood. The Genesis tradition, as received in Western Christianity, emphasizes human moral failure. Both texts and both traditions are real. Whether the Enochic tradition preserves a more historically accurate account, whether Genesis reflects a later theological simplification, or whether both represent different ancient literary approaches to the same set of underlying concerns, is a question that mainstream biblical scholarship discusses without consensus. It is a genuine scholarly debate worth engaging through the published literature. The Council of Laodicea's 364 CE exclusion of Enoch is documented. The connection between Jude 1:14's direct quotation of Enoch and the subsequent exclusion of Enoch from the canon is a genuine textual and historical puzzle that mainstream scholars of canon formation acknowledge and discuss. Jerome's treatment of the Enochic material is documented. Augustine's discussion in the City of God is documented. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's continuous preservation of Enoch in its biblical canon is documented and represents a genuine alternative canonical tradition that has maintained the text continuously where Western Christianity did not. The claim in some alternative research that the canonical exclusion was specifically motivated by the hierarchical and named nature of the Watcher account, that replacing 22 named Watchers with a single unnamed devil served institutional purposes, is a proposed interpretive argument. It is worth examining seriously. It is also worth noting that canon formation involved many texts and many considerations, and attributing specific suppression motives requires documentation that goes beyond the exclusion decisions themselves. What can be independently verified? Fragments 4Q201 through 4Q204 are real and publicly catalogued at the Israel Antiquities Authority. The Ge'ez manuscripts are real holdings in real institutions. Jude 1:14 does quote 1 Enoch directly. The 22 Watcher names are consistent across manuscript traditions. The Azazel name appears in both 1 Enoch and Leviticus 16. The relationship between these two uses is a genuine scholarly debate. The Nephilim taxonomy in chapter 15 is documented in Nibbs and Nicholsberg's published translations. The flood decree, including the Dudale location, is consistent across the Aramaic and Ge'ez manuscript traditions. What remains in scholarly debate? The literal versus theological interpretation of the Watcher narrative, the relationship between the Azazel of Enoch and the Azazel of Leviticus, whether the Enochic cosmological framework preceded, influenced, or ran parallel to other Near Eastern traditions, whether the canonical exclusion was motivated by the hierarchical specificity of the text. What this documentary does not endorse, any specific theological claim about the literal existence of Watchers, Nephilim spirits, or demonic hierarchies, any specific claim about what demons are or where they originate, any claim that the Church's canonical decisions were definitively motivated by suppression of this specific hierarchy narrative. 1 Enoch is a genuine, authenticated, significant ancient text preserved across 3 independent manuscript traditions. Its Watcher narrative is unusually specific within the genre of Second Temple Jewish apocalyptic literature, named figures, ranked positions, specific locations, formal legal structures. That specificity is acknowledged in mainstream Enoch scholarship and is worth engaging with seriously. The connection between 1 Enoch and canonical texts, Jude's direct quotation, the Azazel reference in Leviticus, the influence of Enochic traditions on early Christian demonology, is a real and actively researched area of scholarship. The texts are available, the scholarship is published. Anyone interested in this subject can engage with it through the genuine academic literature that exists around it. Whether the hierarchy Enoch described reflects historical memory, sophisticated ancient theological speculation, or something else entirely, that is a question the available evidence does not settle. The text says what it says, and genuine questions, examined through honest methods, are where understanding begins.